Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Newburyport Literary Festival. My name is Leslie Hendrickson. I'm on the steering committee of the festival. And of course, I can't see you, but I'm so glad you're here. We are so excited about the festival this year. This is our second year online and our 16th edition of the event. We, of course, hope to be back in person next year, but we have found that this format has allowed us to bring a lot of new and different authors to the festival. And in fact, it's our biggest event ever with more than 100 participants. Just a couple things before we get started. We are using the webinar format, so you might know this, but you'll see and hear the panelists and you won't be able to see yourself. If you have comments, please use the chat. We'd love to know where you're from, if you're new to the festival or an old friend. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A tab. That'll allow the presenters to see them clearly and keep them organized. As you may know, today is Independent Bookstore Day, and we want to support our independent bookstore partners. So links to our partners, the Bookshop of Beverly Farms and Jabberwocky Bookshop in Newburyport, will be in the chat, and they have all the books from authors in the festival. So we encourage you to support them or your own local independent bookshop. Lastly, we have 2 days of great stuff planned, so we hope you'll come back. Check out our other events on the Newburyport Literary Festival website. And now I'll introduce our panelist. Mateo Askaripour was a 2018 Rhode Island Writers Colony writer in residence, and his writing has appeared in Entrepreneur, LitHub, Catapult, The Rumpus, Medium, and elsewhere. He lives in Brooklyn, and his favorite pastimes include binging music videos and movie trailers, drinking yerba mate, and dancing in his apartment. Black Buck is his debut novel. You can also follow him on Twitter and Instagram at AskMateo, I will put that in the chat as well. Ryan Ludman is a technical writer in Silicon Valley. With his friend Russell, he is the host of the Spilling Tea Book Club, with virtual meetings discussing books by women from the 20th century. With a passion for books and writing, he can be found chronicling his reading journey on Instagram at Read by Ryan, which I will also put in the chat. Thank you both so much for being here, and I will turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Mateo, for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about your debut novel, Black Buck, out from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. This is a New York Times bestseller. It was a Read with Jenna Today Show pick. It's been featured in Entertainment Weekly, The Washington Post, Wired, O Magazine. This book is everywhere. Congratulations. That's so huge.
Damn, thank you, Ryan. It's just, it's real when I hear other people say it. Also, I didn't know there was going to be this many people here. I'm so excited. Let's go. I'm so excited.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So Black Buck is about Darren Vendor. He works at Starbucks in the bottom of 3 Park Avenue in New York City in Manhattan.
Yes, sir.
And one day, the CEO of a tech startup upstairs comes in and he convinces him to order something else, and the CEO brings him up for an interview.
Yep.
And that's how the book starts. You have experience as in this world, right? And in sales, in tech. How much did that inform your writing of this novel?
Ooh, it informed so much. You know, I didn't have to do any research about sales or the world of startups or tech. I lived it. In fact, where the book is set is the same building where I used to work. Now, it's not the same company, right? Come on. Even though there is a disclaimer at the beginning that anything real or technically real is just by coincidence. And that Starbucks is a real place. In fact, I tried to hire someone from that Starbucks once, my own version of Darren Vendor. And the last, let's call it coincidence, even though I don't really believe in coincidence. The last illustration of fate, we'll say, is that when I signed with my publisher, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, they said that their offices are also located at 3 Park Avenue, where the book takes place, right? So I did work in sales. I've been someone who was making cold calls, also calling inbound leads, then being promoted very quickly like Darren. Then when I was 24, I managed a team of 30 people that were making calls that I was training and hiring and so forth. So my life most definitely does inform this book. And whether you see my own history on the page or just some of my experiences, or even the experiences of other people, I will say that the truest thing in this book are the feelings. I have felt everything that these characters have felt. I had to mine my own emotional history in order to be able to do that, and hopefully have you, the reader, feel many things too.
Well, I can really attest that I felt the emotion in this book.
Did you get angry?
I have some familiarity with the tech world. I've worked with some people tangentially in sales, and I had a lot of preconceived notions about salespeople. And then when reading this book, with the different ways that Darren gets renamed as Buck, he becomes, when he gets essentially hazed, when he starts at this company, it was horrifying to me, and it was so tense. Like, I could really feel it, and I could see that maybe you went through some of those experiences or know people who did. Did you haze anyone when you were a manager?
That's so funny. I've never been asked that bluntly. No. So a couple things. When I was a manager and hiring people, there was most certainly psychological warfare at play, right? It was the type of thing where you wanted someone by the end of the interview to want to be there so badly that they felt as though they were being done a service by being given this job, right? Rather than the fact that they are then dedicating 12, 13, 14 hours of their waking lives that they can never get back to a corporation. You see, and this is representative of a lot of organizations and the very basis of capitalism, where people are being compensated for their lives and the hours that they're giving to an organization, but it doesn't always feel that way. When I was young and hiring people, I wanted them to feel the same way that I did when I was at that company, and that I was special and that I was lucky to work there. Even though later on the veil was lifted and I was like, what am I doing? We're not curing cancer. like so many of these organizations, especially startups, they might be making a more ergonomic chair and making it seem like, they're performing, brain surgery when they're not. But going back to me in my own life, I did have very intense and bizarre experiences rooted in racism, but a lot of that happened outside of the workplace, especially when I was younger, where I grew up. And I took those experiences and I translated them into the workplace because it was fitting, but to also show the reader what it often feels like for so many of us. And it doesn't always even have to do with race. It could be sexual orientation, right? Gender expression, religion, and so forth. What it can feel like when someone says something seemingly innocuous or mundane, right? It can feel like someone's pouring a bucket of white paint on you. It can feel like the world is splitting right in front of your eyes. So I definitely wanted the reader to also feel that way. And for a lot of folks, they read it and it is intense, as you said, but they feel seen. They feel less alone. They feel like they're not crazy or paranoid or overly sensitive when they have perceived something to be amiss in these places. And then other folks read it and they're like, damn, my eyes are partially open or more open than before. And thank you. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for those responses.
Yeah, that's great. I think it was so intense, and you're right. It does feel like you're shining a light on experiences that don't get a lot of traction in books, media, especially from white people who don't have those same experiences. So it was really great to read. And the book is, though it deals with racism pretty bluntly, it's also really funny. And one of the running jokes is that Buck is told he looks like every famous Black person: Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Sidney Poitier, even though they look nothing alike. And he gets told that he looks just like them. Yeah. How did you bring humor into this book for such a such a heavy topic.
Yeah. It is funny when you bring up that instance, because at first you're like, this is funny. You're like, you're laughing. Then by the end, you're like, what the hell? I even thought about throwing Oprah in there just to really hit the point home. Oprah or someone like that. You know, has anyone ever told you they look like Gayle King? To just really hit it home. But for me, this tone of the book was very intentional. Right? I did not want it to be 400 pages of tragedy and trauma or doom and gloom. There's enough of that in literature, and far better writers than me have already done it, and far better writers than me will do it. But it's also the way that my mind works. These are very serious topics that require serious examination. However, it would be inauthentic for me to render them on the page or render this individual like Darren Bender without some levity and without some humor. And I'm hoping that the humor at times does underscore the horror, but also if people are laughing at something, then maybe down the line, you know, in a couple months or a couple of years or whenever it happens, they'll say, huh, was that thing that I thought was funny as I thought it was in the moment? You know, I'm putting a lot of the responsibility on the reader through blurring so many lines, absurdity, satirical elements, reality. And I'm asking the reader to do some work and just figure out for themselves what's what. And I truly believe, Ryan, that it's not my job as the writer to judge the reader or judge what someone takes away. They're on their own journey. And what I can do with this book is bring up some questions and some of my own commentary. I'm not going to hide behind fiction. You know, many of my own thoughts are in there too, but hoping that the reader by the end will say, okay, this was tough. This was funny. This was sad, but it was worth it.
Yeah. I think the book was not preachy at all, even though it definitely had a message.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made it so compelling. It works as a thriller, as a page turner, but it still is saying something about society, capitalism, race that was really great. And I really enjoyed that.
I'm so happy, real quick, Ryan, I'm so happy that you brought up the word thriller, because that is what the last third of the book feels like, or last quarter. And that wasn't even intentional at first, right? When I was writing this book, I was allowing myself to be free. I knew like the basics of it, but I didn't know what was always going to happen until maybe a couple days or a week before actually writing it. So when that thriller aspect came around, after I finished writing it and I reread it and I was revising, I was like, damn, this is like a whole nother genre. That's fun. And hopefully it'll be fun for the readers too.
Yeah, it was really fun, really compelling. Like I couldn't put it down type of book. It starts with an author's note.
Yes, sir.
About writing this book. And at first, when you read it, you might think that it was you. It was your author's note.
So many people do.
I did at first, and I was like, where is this going? And then quickly we learned that it's told from Buck's perspective. He's writing a book for Black people of color who want to get into sales, learn how to sell. How did you come up with that concept? Do you read those types of books? Were they an inspiration to you, or where did this come from?
Ryan, it's so funny because I've had a handful of people tell me that they read the author's note and they read the whole book and thought it was nonfiction. And thought it was they thought it was a memoir. And they're like, did this actually really happen? Like they thought it was real. And I'm like, okay, great. Maybe that means I did a good job then, because while it can be absurd, right, people thought that it was potentially real. So I wrote that author's note January 8th, 2018. It struck me at night. I don't even write at night. I knew that I was going to begin a new book. It was my third manuscript. The first two manuscripts, I'm not going to exactly call them failures, but I didn't achieve my aims with them. I didn't get a book agent. I didn't get a book deal, right? So with this third book, I said, you know what? I'm going to write the book that I want for the people I want to serve in the way that I want. I feel free finally, rather than trying to pander to this industry and write in a certain way and be buddy-buddy with the who's who online. So when I wrote it that night, it poured out of me. And I knew that I wanted it to be written in first person, from Darren's perspective, because I did want it to feel like a sales manual or memoir in a way, aside from just an engaging narrative, right? And a work of fiction. So that's why it kicks off that way, that the reader knows they're going to be taken on a journey. And what the author's note does is it says, trust me, we're about to go on a journey. It's also getting the reader familiar with the conversational tone, which was intentional. It almost feels like, a trusted coach or a buddy is with you. And it also lets you know that this is going to be a little wild just through the way that it's written. It also establishes the rhythm. The author's note, if anyone reads it aloud, I will hope that you'll hear a rhythm, that there's a certain cadence. That was intentional as well. But it wasn't until the fourth draft that I actually broke the fourth wall, again, very conspicuously with the bolded addresses to the reader. Now, going back to one of your questions, with that fourth draft, I was reading Mitchell S. Jackson's The Residue Years. And he would break the fourth wall slightly by saying people, comma, and knew that when he was writing people, he was addressing the reader. And then that took me back to How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia by Mohsin Hamed, which I had read years prior, where at the beginning of every chapter, there was a rule or a piece of advice for how to get filthy rich in rising Asia, such as befriend a bureaucrat, stash some money away, become a little corrupt, whatever. And then that brought me back, maybe brought me slightly forward, I'm thinking chronologically, to when I got into sales. And two of the people that taught me sales handed me 2 books by a man named Jeffrey Gitomer called The Sales Bible and The Little Red Book of Selling. And these books were just no nonsense, non-BS. This man, Jeffrey Gitomer, telling you what you needed to do to be successful in sales. So the intersection of those 3 works just hit me. And I said, I should break the fourth wall very conspicuously. This will really pull this narrative structure of it being a sales manual together and let the reader know what's going on. So that's how it all came about. And I'm just grateful that it did, because I didn't go into it with all of these grand plans. Again, I had to give myself the freedom to run and play.
Yeah, I mean, it did have a very, it had a sense of playfulness while it was still a thriller, terrifying, horrifying. And I think it was super successful, the way you structured the book and how it pulls out the kind of the tension. It helps with the tension of the book by like pulling the reader back and like examining like what are the lessons here. I thought it was great. And I listened to the audiobook also.
Oh,
and if anyone is interested in the audiobook, it's fantastic. And I think you get maybe more of the humor, or you get that rhythm that you talked about.
Yes.
So I really like that.
Yeah, the audiobook is special. The first time I heard it, I was blown away. And I actually did an event with Zeno Robinson, the man who narrated it, and he turned off his camera and just read, and it was such a surreal experience. So yeah, for those who would like to reread the book or listen to it, the audiobook, as Ryan said, is a great way to consume it.
Yeah, it was a great performance. We have some questions here from the audience. And if you have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A panel and I'll get to the ones that I can. David asks, how much did you have to change character descriptions to avoid libel suits? If so, any tips on how to do this?
Hey, David, thanks for the question. Well, to be honest, right, I say that some of this is based off of my own experience, but if there are any people in this book or any people from my own life that could look at this book and say, that's me, they're far and few in between. And even if, they were to say, hey, this sort of seems like it's me, that's fine. I mean, it's a work of fiction. And yeah, I mean, that's all I really say. There's like, all right, let's get a little bit deeper. With this book, Black Buck, I had to do a whole lawyer questionnaire. I had to fill out a questionnaire to let them know like what could have been inspired by some people or this, that, and the other. So they checked all of it. But also at the end of the day, I'm not concerned. This is a work of fiction. I'm not portraying it as nonfiction. Even if it were nonfiction, I have the right to, discuss my experiences. And if someone feels upset about it, then, they have the right to air that out as well. In terms of switching up characters, like if I had to switch up characters, I say make it easy for yourself, right? When I said that I set this book in the place that I worked, and where it takes place in Bed-Stuy is down the street from where I was living when I was 21 and beginning to work in the world of startups as well. I had to make it easy on myself because there's so much that's going on in the book that I didn't want to have to recreate settings and this, that, and the other. So I say the same to you, David, in terms of changing up characters, it could be as simple as changing appearance, changing ethnic background, changing gender expression, those types of things, changing names. Don't go too crazy with it. Make it easy on yourself. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, David, for the question. You talked a bit about your revision process and adding the notes in the book. And an anonymous attendee asked, did the book change from your writing through the revision process?
Most definitely. Oh, this first draft was 168,000 words. That's like 50 to 100 pages less than Moby Dick. I was out there writing the next Odyssey. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't have a formal writing background. So for me, when I was writing Black Buck, again, I was giving myself freedom to write how I wanted, in the way that I wanted. And I had so much fun. But then I was like, damn, this sucker's big. Like I can't, there's no way that I could send 168,000 words to an agent to read this. So I had to then go back to the drawing board. And from the first to the second draft, I cut about 27,000 words. And the way that I did that was cutting out subplots that just weren't really necessary to the overall book, cutting out characters, reading the book aloud to make sure that every sentence flowed in the way that I wanted. And from draft to draft, I was getting to know these characters even better. So then on the next draft, I would go back and say, would Buck actually say this or do this? And if he wouldn't do this, do I still want him to do it so he's acting out of character to make it that much more interesting? Because think about all of us in our lives, right? And the people that we hold close to us. Sometimes we act out of character, and that's interesting, but also sometimes devastating. So yes, the book definitely changed from draft to draft. And I had to be committed to telling the best story I could in the best way that I could, at least at that time. So having that in the bigger picture allowed me to cut out characters that I liked, to cut out so many subplots, right? If I say that the book was 168,000 words when I began, and what you see behind me is around 110, 113, I cut out like a whole other book. There's so many people you didn't get to meet, so many wild things that you didn't get to read. But hopefully if we bring it to the screen, you'll be able to see it. So yes, it did change from draft to draft.
Do you envision a sequel or something in the same world?
I never did, but what I've been telling myself is that if enough people want it, I might write a sequel in like 10 years. But to be honest, after writing, I was like, I never want to write about this again or write about the startup world again.
That's fair. We have another question from Katz. What do you think are the qualities you have acquired in your career as a sales professional that serve you well as an author, other than using the setting for a novel?
Hey, Katz. Thank you for the question. That's such a good one, and one that I can't speak enough about. Through sales, oh man, where do we start? I know we don't have too much time, so I'm going to try to keep this brief, right? I was making at times 150, 200 calls a day, sometimes never connecting with anyone on the other line, or sometimes connecting with 10 people and them hanging up on me, or calling people, asking for Jim. They say, hey, Jim's dead. So sales taught me to have a short-term memory when it came to rejection, to look at rejection as a means to an end, to not take it too personally, to look at my losses and ask myself, with as much objectivity as possible, why didn't this work out? And that came into play with my first 2 manuscripts. I could have gotten hung up on that first one and say, this is never going to work, I'm done. But I said, no, I need to, continue to persevere. It gave me a large amount of persistence and perseverance. And it also it taught me to be a good listener, to really just listen to people. And through being able to listen to people, I've been able to better digest emotions, my own emotions, and come to my own self with an unflinching honesty that's necessary in order to not just be a better writer, a more empathetic writer, and get those feelings down on the pages I was bringing up before, but just, I hope, be a better person. So sales helped me a lot. I also lost myself when I was working at a startup in the same way that Darren does. And losing myself, leaving that job, and then having my family and friends there to put me back together again and help me find the better parts of myself has grounded me in a way that has most definitely served me as a writer and then now as an author. So yeah, there's just so much to discuss, but that's all I'll say for now. Thank you for the question, Katz.
Thanks, Katz. Benjamin asks, how would you describe your writing process? Do you write a little every day, or would ideas come in bursts and write for a longer period of time?
Hey, Benjamin. With Black Buck, so the first draft, I was really not, I was living at my parents' house at this point. I'd moved back there from New York City. I traveled a little bit, and I didn't want to be a starving artist. I don't really, I don't like the idea of the starving artist. I believe that for us to create art, we need to be healthy, like financially, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and so forth. So I was consulting with tech startups across North America. This allowed me to make money while not having to be so entrenched in the world of startups and sales again, and somewhat create my own schedule. So because of that, I couldn't just write every day. But when I could write, I had an extensive routine, which I still have today. And I would typically write back then for Black Buck, probably for 2 to 4 hours at a time. Today, I don't write for that long when I write. But yeah, 2 to 4 hours at a time, because I had so much energy and I had this, I didn't have anything that I have now in terms of resources or people knowing who I am. It felt like it was do or die. I need to write this book. The other two didn't work out. So whenever I had the time, I was writing. Now today, I have a routine in place where by the end of my routine, I feel sufficiently inspired to come to the page with the requisite amount of confidence and energy and enthusiasm and openness to do what I need to do. With this next thing that I'm working on, I see a question from Nicole, thanks. With this next thing that I'm working on, it's different than Black Buck, and it requires a different set of muscles. Some of the muscles I have, some I need to acquire, some I need to strengthen. And I am just trying to be as kind to myself as possible. I think, and you didn't ask for advice, but if I could give a piece, to any writers out there, it would be try to create without judgment. Know that, once you finish your work, you can revise it as many times as you'd like, and be kind to yourself and try to have some fun. Even though I know whenever anyone says have fun, it's just like a little corny, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Benjamin, and thanks, Mateo. What else are you working on that's new? I see you're wearing a hat that looks like it's Black Buck themed.
Oh yeah.
I saw you have a new line of swag.
Oh yeah, it's a merch shop. It's been a long time coming. It just dropped last week.
Well, congratulations, that's awesome.
15% of profits go to charity or an organization that might not even be a nonprofit, but that's doing some good work. So yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else you can talk about right now?
Well, this has been a long time coming, but I hope that we can announce something within the next couple of weeks or a month about Black Buck, being adapted for the screen in one form or another, whether that be, film, TV show, what have you. Again, working on another work, still connecting with great people like yourself, Ryan, and great people in the audience, and having a blast while doing it. The book comes out in the UK in May 27th. I believe it comes out in Australia in a couple of days. So if you have any friends across the pond, let them know. And yeah, man, just trying to stay sane, trying to spread positivity and remain happy during these trying times. And it's been a wild year for everyone.
Yeah, this must be a weird time to launch a book.
Yeah.
You like to travel, I take it?
Oh, I love to travel. And the thing is like, yeah, I don't know anything different. This is my debut novel. So it's coming out in this virtual world. And there have been a couple times I was like, oh, this would have been fun to do in person. But on the whole, I'm pretty grateful because I've been able to connect with so many people like you or people in other places far and wide that I might have not been able to go to had we not been living in this pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong. I wish this pandemic never happened, but making the most out of it has been something that's important to me. So yeah.
Great. We have a question from Russell. As you're writing the novel, did anything occur in the book that surprised you as a writer? Like, I didn't see that coming. And if yes, how did it affect the overall arc of the book?
This is a good one. So going back to earlier in the conversation when Ryan and I were discussing the thriller aspect, I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that it was going to turn into that, right? When I began writing Black Buck, I knew the big twist. And for those who have read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about, the big twist. But I had no idea how he was going to get there. And I also knew that I wanted there to be multiple climaxes, but I didn't know what they would be. So I had to figure all that out. And by the end, when we got to this thriller aspect, I'm not going to say it changed the arc of the whole story, but I was happy and I was surprised by it. Yeah, that's what comes to mind right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said multiple climaxes because the book does shift quite a bit in the middle of the book. Darren starts an organization called Happy Campers to help people of color advance in the sales world, and that has a lot of repercussions throughout his company and the people he knows. Was that always planned as part of the book?
I did want there to be an organization, but I had no idea what it was going to look like. I had no idea about the name. And I didn't know the far-reaching consequences of it, but I knew that it was going to empower a lot of people and upset a lot of people, as happens in reality when marginalized individuals try to get ahead in some way or fashion. That was just something that I knew was going to happen, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. And when we're talking about the shifts in the book, I very purposely wanted the book to change from chapter to chapter or part to part, and sometimes page to page, where it's very serious and then all of a sudden you're laughing. And that's not to make the book in a way manic, right? But I wanted it to be engaging, and I wanted the readers to say, okay, I might not enjoy what's happening right now, but I do want to figure out where it goes and what happens. And I'm invested enough in seeing if it's going to pay off. And for those who stick through the book and get to the end and, have some takeaways or at the very least, they enjoy it or feel as though it was worth reading, I couldn't be happier because of that.
I think those twists, those changes, kept surprising me. I read a lot of books, so I can often predict what's going to happen in a traditional plot. And so that's what was really fun, is that you really didn't know where this was going. And so that was really exciting.
Part of that was because of how I wrote it. Again, not knowing whether a couple days or a week or maybe a week or two in advance of what was going to take place in the book. And I wanted there to be that sense of spontaneity for me as the writer, hoping that it would then translate for the reader, as you're saying, so that they wouldn't really be able to predict what was going to happen, but that it wouldn't be so far off the rails that it's like, okay, he's just making whatever up. With the manuscript that I'd written before Black Buck, I outlined it from beginning to end. I knew exactly what was going to take place before I wrote it, but that took the vigor out of it, and it took the fun out of it for me. And, no wonder it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately so, because it probably wasn't fun to read.
Lauren asks, would you release the 2 books you wrote but did not release earlier because you are now popular, or will you just let them go?
Lauren, come on, I'm not popular. Like, people know about the book a little bit, but there's levels to this. Thanks for the question. No, I wouldn't release those 2 books. I'm a little embarrassed about those 2 books. And not because of the writing. I think that if I were to read them again, that there would be things that I like about them from a craft perspective, but they touch on certain things and certain events that are tangentially related to my own life. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to discuss these, but there's nothing to say that parts of them or ideas won't make it into another work down the line. Of course, I'm remaining open, and I am happy that I wrote them, but I'm even happier that they never went anywhere.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. We have one more question from Michelle, and this is a question I always like to ask authors because it's always fascinating to me. She says, Mateo, hello, what are you reading now?
Hey, right now I'm reading Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I enjoyed A Man Called Ove, and whenever I read like a very serious string of books that are just very heavy, I need to cleanse my palate once in a while. And this book, I'm probably never going to meet Frederick Bachman, but this book is like a palate cleanser. I knew that it wasn't good, but I should have known because he's good about like really incorporating sadness into his work. So I'm reading that right now. And then afterwards, I just have a bunch of books that are either coming out this year or are super old, like a bunch of books from William Melvin Kelly. If you don't know who William Melvin Kelly is, look up A Different Drummer. Just check that out. Powerful. And I'm probably going to read The Marathon Don't Stop, The Life and Times of Nipsey Hussle. It's a biography of the late rapper named Nipsey Hussle. He's actually on this shirt, coincidentally. And he's a big inspiration for me in terms of, how he gave back to his community and what he lived for. So I'll probably read that shortly.
Cool. That's great. Thanks. Russell says, can you talk about any other books or writers that have inspired or taught you about your own craft, or would you recommend to readers and writers?
Most definitely. Thanks, Russell. 2 books that helped me, that were instrumental in my life as a writer, is On Writing by Stephen King. It's part autobiography, part craft and memoir, as well as Plot and Structure by a man named James Scott Bell. Reading that book, Plot and Structure, helped me learn about plot and structure. This was after I'd written my first manuscript. And again, that first manuscript, it was cool because there was a lot of energy, but it was all over the place. I didn't know what I was doing. Plot and Structure felt like I had this guy, James Scott Bell, right next to me, coaching me and teaching me because, again, I don't have my MFA, my Master's in Fine Arts and Writing. I don't have a formal writing background. So I try to learn what I can from a craft perspective while not learning too much to then inhibit me and inhibit what originality might be in the work or what I hope to achieve in my work. Other books that influenced me as a writer was The Sellout by Paul Beatty. When I read The Sellout, man, read The Sellout. Right, for those who have read Black Buck and you think it's wild, The Sellout takes it to a whole nother level. When I read that, I said, maybe I can write something that really, really, really pushes the envelope if I'm skilled enough to pull it off, let's say. So that book was instrumental. Of course, reading any James Baldwin growing up, I would always feel so angry after reading James Baldwin. And whether I knew it or not, that likely played a role in me wanting readers to feel things, feel many things. So yeah, those are a couple writers. Other folks that are near and dear to me, John A. Williams. When I read John A. Williams, The Angry Ones, I realized that what I was doing with Black Buck, while I hoped that it would be original story, was part of a larger tradition of Black writers writing about sometimes being the only one or one of the few in these in these environments. I only read The Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee last August, so long after Black Buck was done in the copy editing phase and being proofread. But that is the book that I believe is most in conversation with Black Buck, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And it was written in 1969, so a long time ago, but it shows you how much further we have to go as a people if 2 books are speaking so closely to one another and they're 52 years apart. So yeah, those are a couple. Also, Heads of the Colored People by Nafisa Thompson Spires. I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you so much. There's so many great books that we can all check out. Let's see. How has your view of success changed since you've written Black Buck, since it's been published, like since you've left like sales, like how has your view of success changed over time?
When I was in sales, like Darren, I think that to my credit, right? I don't want to, bash a younger me fully. I was very mission focused, and it wasn't like priority number one was money, but I did get caught up in that life. I was 24. I was managing 30 people. I made over 6 figures, right? I was caught up with so much of the flash and the partying and all of those things, and being well liked and having influence and being able to get what I wanted and X, Y, Z, right? Those things don't cross my mind today. With Black Buck, I wanted people to feel seen and feel empowered. So for me, Ryan, success means when I get a message from someone and they say, you don't know me, but I saw my life reflected back to me in your pages. And because of that, I feel less alone. Because of that, I know that I'm not overly sensitive or paranoid or crazy when I perceive something to be amiss in these environments. In the same turn, when someone says, I am nothing like Darren, I'm a 65-year-old, white Jewish woman from XYZ, but I saw my own life reflected because I've been the only woman on an executive team, or this, that, the other. Or I have no idea what it's like for someone like Darren. So my eyes have been opened, and I am now better equipped to be an ally. Those responses to the book are how I define success today, right? Of course, I wanted to be a New York Times bestseller. Of course, I wanted the book to be adapted to the screen. Of course, I wanted all of those things, but they're not how I define success today.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone hasn't read the book yet, please go out and support Black Buck. You can buy the book from the Jabberwocky Bookshop or the Bookshop of Beverly Hills. That'd be a great way to celebrate National Bookstore Day, Independent Bookstore Day. So thanks, Mateo.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. Excuse me. Thank you both so much. I thought it was a great way to end with, the new definitions of success.
Thank you in the audience. Be well, be healthy, try to be happy.